So today we have the pleasure to have with us Tomaso Rodriguez. Tomaso is the CEO of Talabat. Talabat is part of Delivery Hero Group, and technically speaking, is one of the unicorn, even more than a unicorn of the region, despite the fact that being part of a larger group probably doesn't allow to qualify it like that. But for sure, is a gigantic success story in terms of startup scaling into unicorn, larger tech companies of the region. So I have the pleasure to have with me today Tomaso.
Ciao Alberto, how are you?
So far, so good. It's a pleasure to have with you today. And I think there are a lot of interesting topics to be discussed about the history of Talabat. But before entering the history of Talabat, I'd like to just quickly recap your personal history. I think if you are on board as a CEO of Talabat since just 2-3 years, and so it would be interesting to know what you've done before that.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm extremely excited to be here as well. Thank you very much for inviting. So yeah, probably just start by quickly introducing myself. As you said, I'm running Talabat since September 2019, so it's around 2 years and a half now. And before that, and this was my first experience in the Middle East, actually. Before that, I was in Singapore, and I was running, actually created and ran the food delivery business of Grab. As probably many people know, Grab is kind of the super app of Southeast Asia. They have 3 main lines: food delivery, ride sharing, and financial services. And I was the CEO of the food delivery business and launched and scaled across 250 cities in Southeast Asia. And prior to that, I was at Uber. I've been with Uber for 5-6 years, across ride sharing first as general manager in Italy and Greece. And after that, I launched and was head of regional operations for Uber Eats for the Asian region, across like India, Southeast Asia, North Asia, Australia, and New Zealand.
And how do you cross path with Talabat of the Middle East? Because from Singapore to the Middle East is quite a big jump.
Well, it is. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this was because I thought, Talabat is a fantastic company, has an amazing heritage, as we're going to discuss later. But also was the first time for me to operate in this region. And I have to say, it's. I think this is the moment of Middle East, right? I think that the startup ecosystem and the scale-up ecosystem is really booming, and a lot of very great things are coming out of this region. So I think it's kind of becoming the place to be, and if you're into tech, if you're into startups, and I'm really excited for the next 10 years of this region.
Again, this is a perfect headline for our Scale Up Summit in the region. So to say that the Middle East is booming for startups. But let's talk about the Talabat. I think it probably is the poster children of the region thus far. Hopefully more Talabat will come. Founded in 2004 in Kuwait, if I'm not wrong. Can you wrap it up, the scale-up history of Talabat?
Yeah, so Talabat was born by 2 Kuwaiti nationals in 2004 as a platform to connect restaurants and customers. And if you think about it, 2004, it was quite a long time ago in tech terms, right? And it was just a web.
Yes, it's a geological age ago. Yes, probably. Yes.
Exactly. So it's just kind of a portal to connect restaurants and customers, right? And then after a few years, Talabat started expanding in other markets like Saudi, like UAE, like Bahrain, Qatar, and received quite some funding until it was acquired in 2015. By Delivery Hero, right? So Delivery Hero still owns 100% of Talabat. Delivery Hero is a publicly listed company in Germany. And Talabat now operates in 9 countries across Middle East and North Africa. And these will be all the GCC countries, plus Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq.
Can you give us some figures in terms of Talabat's revenue, headcount, riders? What's the current size of the business?
Yeah, so Talabat has around 4,000 employees today, plus around 100,000 riders across the region, and we're doing several billions in terms of GMV on a yearly basis.
And again, obviously, COVID, the pandemic, boosted the growth of Talabat because, again, it gave us this opportunity, probably allow this market to exploit. But there was already on a pre-existing growing curve, and I believe, based on some prior conversation we have, the specific approach of Delivery Hero actually contributed a lot in this growth partner. Because again, most of the time, one of the big topic, the big elephant in the startup room across the globe, but particularly not in the US, is that typically established companies are not used to acquire startups, and when they buy them, most of the time they freeze them, or it's very, very difficult to integrate because the culture are different. I believe that Delivery Hero, based on what I know and based on what we have discussed in prior occasion we talked, is a very particular model that gives us a lot of freedom and autonomy to the acquired company. I think we'll be probably interested to deep dive this the latest years of growth, and particularly the role of Delivery Hero that had in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Delivery Hero as this acts as a holding, right, in the group, and Delivery Hero owns several food delivery companies across the world, right? So, for example, Foodpanda in Asia or Pedidosia in Latin America, and several others, right? I think what's really amazing is that Delivery Hero has this way of thinking where they spot like companies that of course are doing great, but they have the potential to become much bigger and to scale, when they're paired with some expertise and with good management and with a good product, etc., etc. And I think that was the case of Talabat, right? So the team did a tremendous job to scale Talabat, but I think Delivery Hero really helped to boost it like to the next level. I just give you one figure. Like in 2017, Talabat celebrated 100 million orders. Like so, in the past 13 years of history, we made 100 million orders. Right now, we do several hundreds of millions of orders every single year. Right, and this happened just in the last 5 years. So kind of really, we hit the hockey stick curve post acquisition, and I think this is one of the key strengths of international player that really wants to act locally, though. Because I think in my previous experiences when I was at Uber and more kind of bigger international companies, right? I think the weakness that the company that acts globally with the same product, with the same mindset, with the same operations across the globe, like will always face local competitors that have a product that is like catered more for the specific region, right? Or operations that are more specific to the region. And most of the times, like that's a winning strategy, right? So I think Delivery Hero is kind of a bit of the best of both worlds, where you have an international holding, but that truly really believes in localizing their product and their operations in every market they're in.
How much know-how comes from Delivery Hero, and how much is the customization, localization piece, the autonomy? Again, this is a huge topic: globalization versus multi-domestic strategy. Again, Michael Porter was writing about that probably in the 80s, in the 90s, and I think this just hearing your words, it's come back a part of MBA to my mind. And again, but it's always been a complicated balance between the desire to have a sort of global approach, one size fits all, when you can also deploy the know-how, the routines, the processes that you have mastered elsewhere, with the need of localization, customization, adaptation to the single markets. And so how does it play? Because again, should be something, some superpowers coming from Delivery Hero, but also something that is the local recipe that you are able to cook.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And the reality is that finding the right balance is hard, and I don't think anyone has the perfect recipe. But I can tell you how it's managed in Talabat and Delivery Hero. So the Talabat app and the Talabat tech is fully developed here in Dubai and managed by us. We have a team, of course, of product and tech engineers, right? But there are some components, and mostly some backend components, that are built globally also by Delivery Hero. And I'll tell you exactly why. So when Delivery Hero started acquiring companies that were doing food delivery, most of these companies were what we call marketplace companies, right? So they were just connecting restaurants to customers, and then they will leave the restaurant to do the delivery themselves, right? What really changed food delivery in the past few years was building that model where you build your own logistics infrastructure and then you deliver for the restaurants. And for the customer, that means a much better experience because you have a more dense fleet, so the delivery is faster. You can track your order on the app and all these kind of things, right? So at that point where we all decided to do the switch into moving into on delivery, for example, Delivery Hero said, okay, instead of every single entity building a dispatch algorithm, right? Why don't we build one centrally as a backend service, and then all the entities can plug into the service and build all the front end piece of it, right? And so there are some of the services, mostly in the rider dispatching and logistics and some vendor infrastructure that are built globally, but all the front end and the customer logic is built locally.
That's interesting and powerful. And I think probably another input that might come from being part of a larger group with a lot of experience elsewhere is also, you mentioned one strategic move from marketplace to on delivery. I know that you also move to the quick commerce business. How much of these strategic moves are a certain way being, I would not say pushed, but in a certain way inspired by being part of a larger group that have already done this process elsewhere? And so might help you probably to make such a move that is, I believe, is quite a radical transformation of the business models in a more confident way. Because again, when you do on your own, it is quite a big bet. Yes, you have seen to be done elsewhere. You say probably you can do the same, but probably having someone in the mothership that have done this elsewhere, they all have know-how, and they also the metrics. It can probably be a less, let's say, hazardous move, something that you can do with a bit more confidence. How you can describe something like that?
I think you're really hitting the nail in the head. Like there, it's it requires a lot of guts to take big bets. Like for example, quick commerce, right? So
I can imagine, yes.
Yeah, in the last 2 years, we opened 110 stores across the Middle East. So that's a huge investment in terms of capex, and also a huge investment in terms of like generating the demand, supply, and whatever. So we're talking about like tens of millions, if not hundreds of investment in this vertical, right? So the good thing about this, I think, Delivery Hero is that most of this innovation happens locally in one entity, because there's maybe a CEO or someone that really strongly believes into something and wants to experiment it, right? And then if that model is proved, like then we export it into all the other entities. For example, quick commerce was not something that came top down, but it was done firstly by our sister company, Yemek Sepeti in Turkey. So that's the first company that tried the quick commerce model because they strongly believed in it. and it was a huge success, right? And so when all of us saw the numbers that were happening in Acceptity with their quick commerce stores, like we all wanted to jump on it, right? So it's kind of never kind of a top-down thing. It's like we see what's happening in the other entities and we want the same, right? Because we feel it will work very well in our market. One thing that Talabat is pioneering, for example, for the group is buy now, pay later and fintech services, right? So we were the first entity to launch buy now, pay later, and now we're just in experimentation phases. But it's something I truly believe in for this region, for example, because when you look at our digital payment penetration is not low, it's actually quite high. But 90% of our digital payments happen on debit cards versus credit cards, right? So there's a huge part of our customers that either don't have access to credit or they don't probably trust credit cards or something like that. So I think buy now, pay later is a service that will work very well in this region.
That's very cool. And by the way, going back to my MBA, the model you just described is what Bartlett and Ghoshal was defining as transnational innovation. That was a very, very interesting theory that has never been put into practice efficiently from anybody. So probably you'll be the first one to really be able to put in place as delivery or group approach. And then just a question out of sake of curiosity is how frequently you meet your CEO colleagues of other companies? How there is the internal coordination inside the delivery or group?
So we have informal catch-ups, and we're all into the same, say, messaging platforms or stuff like that. So whenever we need to, quickly ask, we can like reach out to each other. I have several, catch-ups with the other CEOs across the year, but these are kind of more on informal basis, and then globally we have 2 times a year we have kind of summit where we hold the CEOs and the delivery hero management together with Nicholas, our group CEO. Will meet and discuss priorities, discuss what's going on in the markets, etc. Right? So we have both informal and formal kind of mechanisms.
Cool, interesting. So moving from Talabat to the rest of the region, how integrated is the MENA, the Arab region? Again, there are 19 countries ranging from Northern Africa up to the Gulf region. How do you see them as a single market, or the local differences are so big that you need to address one after the other? Because again, one of the big topic of discussion of the issues of startup to scale up is the fact they do not have most of the time a big market. The US company typically do have, European they do not. Yes, theoretically there is the European Union, but practically there are a number of countries with different rules, different regulation, and different culture and habits. So how do you see the MENA region, the Arab region? Is closer to Europe or closer to the US or in between? How do you address as a single market, several separate markets? How is it difficult to scale from Kuwait to Saudi to Bahrain to UAE?
That's a fantastic question, actually. So I think it's something in between US and Europe for a few reasons, right? So one big advantage of the region, I would say, is language, right? So there's only one language, right, which is Arabic, and across Egypt, the Gulf countries, etc. Like you have the same language, right? The only exception for us is Iraq, but all the other countries we're in, our app is English and Arabic, right? So this simplifies a lot versus, for example, Europe, right?
Yes.
I would say there are in the MENA region, when you look at Gulf countries, more kind of versus North Africa, I think there are 3 main groups, right? One would be the Gulf countries, right? The 6 GCC countries. Then you have some other countries in the Middle East region, like for example Jordan. And then you have North Africa, which for us is mainly Egypt, right? And GCC countries have more or less same regulations or very similar regulations. For what regards, for example, us or ride-sharing companies like Uber, there's no ride sharing, right? There's no freelance work, right? So kind of all the riders, all the drivers have to be employed, right? And this is a big difference, right? But the regulations are very similar in all the markets, right? But for example, in Egypt, freelance work is approved, right? So you could have freelance riders, right? So I think it's a bit of a mix. The language helps a lot, but you have to make sure that there are some specificities of each market and sensitivities that you need to take care of, right? Also, in terms of purchase power, there's big difference, for example, from I don't know, GCC countries to the average Egyptian customer, right? Of course, and what the offer could be attractive here could not be attractive in Egypt or vice versa. And when it comes to a company like us, food delivery, of course, every single country has completely different food tastes, right? And that's and of course you have to cater your offering for that. But in general, to answer your question, bottom line would be not as easy as US, not as hard as Europe, right?
Okay, something in between. Again, the in between sometimes is still good. So next week we will present a Dubai Chambers full resource we co-produce together with Crunchbear, try to deep dive into the tech scene of the Arab region. And so we are also identify what are the most emerging hotspots in terms of innovation. Beyond the quantitative numbers that we are putting together, I'd like to get your qualitative opinion. What are the countries and the cities that you see are the reference for the tech scene in the region?
Yeah, so I think Dubai is definitely has been growing a lot in terms of tech. There's a lot of great programs that His Highness is putting in place to attract tech talent, and we're, as Talabat is also, we are participating, and we are partnering with the government to attract more engineers, more tech talent. So this 1 million coder program, right, which is I think very aspirational, and but as every time like Dubai wants to do something, they achieve it. So I'm pretty confident that this will happen as well. But a lot is moving also in the other countries, right? And whenever we go to visit countries and then talk with government officials, like they all want to create a richer tech scene, right? We're seeing it. Probably also Egypt is pushing very hard on that front. Actually, Talabat has 2 tech hubs. One is in Dubai, and the other one is in Cairo. But definitely, I think we're going to see the tech scene growing in the region quite a lot.
That's perfect. And by the way, it's quite in line with our quantitative analysis. That is good to know. And so, Tomaso, thanks a lot for sharing your insights. All the best for your continuing scaling up process into unicorns and beyond for Talabat. And definitely thank you for contributing to our Scale Up Summit, and let's touch base. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alberto, for having me, and thank you, Mind the Bridge.